3 weeks into the Biennale, Jitish, what are your impressions thus far?
Uh, well, it's been a incredibly rewarding 3 weeks, because you actually see in a material form, conversations, dialogue, projections of one's own. Of one's own imagination of what the whole thing might be like, and then to actually see that the artworks have actually begun to speak to each other, because that's an alchemy that one can only wait for. It's not something that can actually entirely administer. You can only hope. And for me, the process of actually conceiving the biennial also entailed partly letting the processes generate its own internal, interrelated system, so that the project, rather than sort of superimpose a specific theme, or to kind of build towards a known ending. To me, the process itself entailed really a wide circulation of intuitions in the form of a letter writing process, to then also hope that the exhibition, in that process of one's working, develops a self-organizing principle. And so in a way, when I'm walking from corridor to corridor, or in spaces between projects, is really when it's really fulfilling to see those relationships occur in space, in physically in experience, rather than how it's been for all these months, kind of projections of one's own thinking.
You spoke about artworks relating to each other, communicating with each other, and forming or letting, unleashing meanings, etc. Can you shed a little more light on the idea of works, artistic works in such a site like this, interacting among themselves?
In terms of the overall cartography of the exhibition, one of the ways in which it would probably speak to a visitor is through the mode of recurrence. For instance, you might find the recurrence of certain forms. You might find the recurrence of certain sensory experiences. You might find the recurrence of a certain action. If I mean action, let's say Mark Formanak's video, where you have what appears like scaffolding makers endlessly climbing up, bolting and unbolting planks of wood. It creates a digital clock, and that clock functions in real time. While if you look at the figures of those people build and unbuild, you see an acceleration of the human body that is perennially having to keep time. But at the same time, you have a video of, say, Mark Wallinger in another site, where the action is pretty much the same. It's a group of people building a scaffold. In Wallinger's case, it takes about an hour to build and unbuild. But I think while here it's about a minute of building and unbuilding at all times. But if it takes an hour, in that 1 hour, the scaffold rises to the level of the horizon of the waters. And as the people who've built it ascend onto the horizon, they walk on the surface of the ocean, and in a sense also walk past, if you look carefully, the same line through which many ships have moved in that 1 hour. So in a way, that grid of the built world, the basic armature of any architecture, of any form of human rearrangement of the world. I mean, all forms of housing are nothing but reorganization of this planet, in a way. So this scaffold becomes a unit, a grid within which ships move, time passes, and the oceans continue to interact with you the way the waters here continue to do in your sight line when you move from project to project. Or that might link up to, say, Janine Antoni, where too she actually descends onto the horizon walking on a tightrope. But it's these interrelations of experiences that create perhaps conversations across sites, across different venues, if you say begin with Charles and Ray Eames, which becomes the first video you look at, which in a way reorients one's own, while it is in itself a legendary piece of video and can be viewed and should be viewed in its own rightful place as a remarkable piece of filmic content 40 years before Google Earth. So while you view it with that light, you also through the viewing actually reorient your own experience of your body in this very moment as the camera cuts through space through 10 to the power of 24 zeros, exits to the degree of the known knowledge of the universe at that point in time in the 60s and 70s, and sort of retreats back to the earth and then to the body, and within the body to the lowest unit of human knowledge at that point, at which point it kind of disintegrates into a pure energy field, pretty much the experience you've had when you exited the Milky Way galaxy. So in some ways I think the exhibition begins by reorienting your own perception of yourself, partly through a participation in an experience in front of you, which is I think something that continues through the exhibition. And I hope it's a cluster of after images through which a viewer reads the project.
So if you spoke about walking on the horizon, as it were, does walking on the horizon central to the consciousness of art? Would you say so?
I think the horizon is in some ways central to our own conception of ourselves. We orient ourselves through the horizons we build or create, but also the horizons we confront. So your life would be very different if you never saw a horizon. If you lived in a space where you're completely landlocked, and you have if you lived in a city with just built environments all the time, your experience of life would be different. I think there's something about the horizon which is separate from the skyline. The skyline is what we make, that in a way creates a space for us to think about the world. In a way, because the horizon is super abundant in this site, it does recur through the exhibition as one of the many things that continue to recur. So if, for instance, there's a very simple and a very, at one level playful, at another level profound experience of viewing the two iPhones from David Horowitz, where he makes a departure, he makes a journey, and the journey comes from the word jour, which means a day. So the work is called The Distance of the Day. So he travels one day to go to the other part of the earth from where his mother is located, and both looking at the horizon register in their phones the rising sun and the setting sun on two ends of the planet. And in a way, through this linear running line that runs through the two iPhones, one can see the phantom image of the planet. And it's and in fact our whole participation and our own existence on this circular tenement that we coexist upon, traveling at 100,000 kilometers per hour in directions we don't know where, is something that also recurs in many pieces in the exhibition.
Jitish, Marx spoke about knowledge being a continuum. I'm just reminded when you talk about, to use a cliche, ecology of art. Do you think art itself is a continuum? Would you regard art as being a continuum?
Art as a human endeavor is a continuum. So for instance, all of life, there's nothing is non-continuum, no? In a way, nothing ever stops. Nouns are fallacies of our own fiction of the world being static. There is no noun. Everything is a verb.
Yes.
Everything is in transition, so is our bodies. The bodies with which we began this interview are not the bodies that are conducting the interview right now, because several cells have died in our bodies. That's a continuum, others have been reborn. So we are actually nothing but but forever participating in continuum. We are just feeding on episodes of a continuum. So art is, in that sense, is like everything else, nothing but a continuous process. As artists, we eavesdrop on that continuity in the hope that we capture something of some value and meaning.
A short while ago, we referred to the idea of whether art is anthropocentric or not, relating to what that particular artist spoke about, that art is all-encompassing, and that man alone does not function directly in relation to art. Art encompasses every being in this universe. So
at one level, art might be a vehicle to bypass or overcome some of the limitations with which we perceive the world. But that said, our entire activity is a human-centric nervous system conducting this activity. So, at this point, there could be numerous species in our environment who are seeing this very vision very, very differently, through colors that would be different, through sounds that would be different from how our nervous system perceives it. So I think in some ways all human endeavor continues to play within the space of our species specific experience. That said, I think the processes of art can sometimes be the processes of de-hallucinating ourselves from the restrictions of our own perceptual limitations. So to that extent, yes, perhaps. But otherwise, art is, of course, a human-centric, human narrative for human beings. That's how,
What do you mean by that? How does art de-hallucinate the viewer or the participant in the art?
Art could, purely because of any form of submergence into something beyond a particular, just extending yourself in any space, in any experience, is a form of exiting what is otherwise your limited space of experiencing the world. And this could happen under a tree, this could happen in the presence of a work of art.
So something akin to what Samuel Taylor Coleridge spoke about, the suspension of disbelief. Does art lead to such a suspension of disbelief?
Yes, in that sense, yes. I think in that sense, art is a toolbox through which you can actually reorient your gaze. You could exit an experience different from where you entered it. That potential remains the potential of art. I think that's to that extent, yes.
You come away.
You could come away transformed, if you like, and if you're lucky.
You've spoken extensively about your curatorial practice, what went into curating KMB, which you Ziris Binale. I wanted to delve a little more into your practice as an artist, as a curator. What do you do? Do you stand on the shores of curation, or do you wade into the heart of it all?
Both are interesting. They sound very poetic, so I'd like to think I did both. Because I think, it's a full-on participation in every aspect of the project. Whether it means right from receiving the originating intuitions through which you commence the project, to sharing of those intuitions through the tools available to you curatorially. To me, the primary tool was a tool of correspondence, the tool of the letter, through which you continuously remain in dialogue with artist colleagues, and which is a form of complete involvement. but it's also about retreating back into what one might think of as moments of reflection, because it's also an intense process of, like if we look at from right in the beginning to the opening date, I'm just little over a year. So if you really look at the itinerary, I would be in 2 different continents, or sometimes 3 in the space of 1 week, and that would entail fierce mobility and lots of meetings and lots of physical action in terms of what one does. But it's also about retreating back to consistently let the biofield of this exhibition form in your system, so that you're reflecting while you're moving, you're sort of thinking on the move. To me, that was in some ways the most interesting part, to kind of, to be completely in the thrust of numerous dialogues with artists, historians, scholars, curators in many places, all at the same time. But in fact, having to retreat at all times to ensure that that there's a force field within which what seems to fit and what makes sense becomes available to you. You find your answers in the motion of full activity. So to me, that was really when I reflect back, the first 6-7 months that's probably initially the most pleasurable part. Of course, you can't take away the pleasures of seeing the exhibition come together in the site. So it's been a good 1 year of exhilarating joyride.
The last tested question. You spoke about the biofield of science, the biofield of intuitions. Do you think the site itself, as we sit here, as we speak, the site itself is a key protagonist in all of this?
I mean, the site is a very real. Site itself is a real experience. It's a sensory field in any ways, and artist colleagues have entered rooms dreaming up spaces. I've entered these rooms dreaming of who might actually consecrate the space. So in a way, spatially, architecturally, contextually, your sight lines, your what you see from one room to the other, but equally the broad historical backdrop against which this edifice stands, or this plot of land sits, and the oceans against which they abut, are all relationships that are a chorus of experiences. That is pretty much, in a way, curatorially speaking, it's one of the tools you have to stitch the project, to kind of weave the project together through what one might think of as citations and sightlines. Citations are notations you make either in textual forms, in the metadata that travels alongside the exhibition, your curatorial note, your wall text, etc., and every utterance in your own thinking, but also what you speak about the project in terms of to yourself and to a viewer through the process of curating, but also the non-speaking, which is part of the curatorial process, happens through the site. So that is really the real space through which you move with your bodies. You enter and exit rooms. The corridors, the interstitial spaces are really spaces where I think meanings circulate.
Could you have imagined KMB, the Kochi Mrs. Benali, in any other site other than where we sit today?
This site is terrific. Aspinwall House and the sites we have are absolutely wonderful. But at the moment when I took on this role in November, it wasn't entirely certain that we'll have this site. So in fact, it wasn't until end of Jan, which is Jan 2014, that we actually had a total confirmation that we can actually use the site from September onwards. So if I look at my own thinking between November to Jan, I was also thinking some of the ideas, but also spatially I was open to the possibility that this would have to perhaps disperse in many houses. It might have to be many warehouses. It could be many other spaces as well. So one had to kind of remain open to contingency in that sense. So I mean, I can think of maybe other ways in which the exhibition can form, but there's nothing that can
excel.
This variety of spatial configurations. Like an old bungalow with wooden flooring and then a vertical high ceiling warehouse, completely dark corridors,
Yes.
and completely open to the oceans kind of spaces. I mean, this total mix within one site is a very, very desirable platform to have to start thinking. But I did think of other things because I didn't know this would be available fully.
Thank you so much.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you.